The Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University is honored to be a supporter of Indian Country Today. ASU offers the only online undergraduate digital media literacy degree, teaching students how to recognize and combat inaccuracies on all platforms. They are using cutting-edge tools and tactics to separate fact from fiction in a digital world overloaded with misinformation. Learn more at cronkite.asu.edu.
This is Indian Country Today.
Esquili, yes, thank you for joining us. I'm Patty Thalahungva. Here are the headlines from Indian Country Today. Secretary Deb Haaland is set to speak at the United Nations on Monday. She will address the 20th session of the UN's Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. Secretary Haaland is expected to address economic, climate, and racial injustice issues facing American Indians and Alaska Natives. Her speech will be streamed live by the UN on its website at 3:45 in the afternoon, and that's Eastern Time. Dante DeCidrio is taking the helm at the National Congress of American Indians. The organization made the announcement Thursday afternoon, saying he will become Chief Executive Officer on May 11th. He previously served as NCAI's Director of Economic Policy. DeCidrio is a citizen of the Saponi tribe, and for the last 10 years, he served as Executive Director of the Native American Finance Officers Association. Well, college enrollment is down for students due to COVID-19. The National Student Clearinghouse Research Center released a report on fall enrollment in the final months of 2020. It shows a decline in overall enrollment and drops for Native students and community college students. We spoke with Cheryl Crazybull. She's the president of the American Indian College Fund, and she says COVID is a barrier to them having a chance at a better future.
It's a lot of Native students in particular are worried about their families' well-being. They may have had, illnesses or deaths in their families associated with COVID. And so then those kinds of things emerge as barriers for students. The very thing that is the main reason students go to school, which is to, create a better opportunity and a better life for their families, is also, I think, what influences students to stay in place.
Some colleges have been offering incentives such as computers or even gift cards to help support students during this time. California tribes are at odds with the state university over its reluctance to respect a sacred site. Correspondent Karina Dominguez has more details on the decades-long fight to protect the land.
Tribes and a cultural alliance are suing Cal State Long Beach over the university dumping soil and construction debris on a sacred site. It's known as Pavungna. The San Juaneño Band of Mission Indians, the Ahecheman Nation Belartis, and the California Cultural Resource Preservation Alliance all argue the California Environmental Quality Act was violated. They say the tribes were not properly consulted about the dumping.
We're here at Pavungna, the land of our people from ancient times. We're trying to preserve this land as it is. Things are changing, or they're filling it and they're putting a new top on it, and the land won't be the same.
Pavungna was reduced to just 22 acres on the Cal State University Long Beach campus. It's considered a place of transformation to the Ahecheman people, and it holds historical, cultural, and religious value to other area tribes. The university admits excavated soil was dumped on Pavungna, but maintains the campus honors Indigenous people and has no plans to develop the sacred site.
I would like to see the land preserved for my great-grandchildren and for their children, so they would know the history of the Native people, the way it was and how it looked.
However, the university stopped short of saying a memorandum of understanding would be signed to permanently protect Pavungna. In Phoenix, Karina Dominguez, Indian Country Today.
The trial scheduled for June 14th was delayed, and no new court date has been announced. Pavungna is listed on the National Register of Historic Places and on California Native American Commission's Sacred Lands Inventory. A sunken warship commanded by a Cherokee and Muskogee Creek citizen is finally found. The U.S. Navy located the wreckage of the USS Johnston in 21,000 feet of water just off the Philippine island of Samar. The ship was lost during the Battle of Samar and was commanded by Ernest Edwin Evans. His aggressive nature and bravery helped win the battle against the Japanese Navy in 1944. And you can visit IndianCountryToday.com to read the full story. And those are the headlines from Indian Country Today. I'm Patty Thalohungva. When we come back, we'll hear about casinos, rivers, and farming.
We'll also take a look at American rivers in danger, and we learn that dreams really do come true.
This is Indian Country Today.
Tribal gaming revenues have an economic impact that reach far beyond reservation boundaries. Casinos went from 24/7 operation to forced closures during the coronavirus pandemic. Correspondent Karina Dominguez talked to tribal leaders about the impact the virus is having on casinos and the communities they fund.
The pandemic started last year on March 2nd for the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. The tribe owns Wild Horse Resort and Casino in Oregon. And on that day, CEO Gary George received news that a non-native employee had been diagnosed with COVID-19.
We were one of the first casinos that really had to deal with the COVID-19 virus. So it was a very interesting and a crisis moment. We didn't really know what to do.
The enterprise shut down for 2 days to deep clean, and just 2 weeks later, Oregon ordered a statewide shutdown, forcing indefinite casino closures. Reopening dates were continuously pushed back for months. Closures had a major impact on the growing tribal casino industry. Tribal gaming is a significant contributor to local and state economies. Pre-pandemic, tribal gaming revenue hit an all-time high, but once the closures hit, tribal leaders prepared for a downturn. The Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community in Arizona didn't see a positive COVID-19 case for quite some time, but felt the economic brunt of the closures immediately.
Government utilizes those funds to provide services to our members. So when that shut down and not having any income being sent from the enterprise to the government, we had to start looking at other ways of, operating.
Many enterprises opted to pay employees during the closures. Like many tribal nations, Umatilla and Salt River both relied on funds set aside for economic development projects. Prior to the pandemic, an industry record was set in 2019 with $34.6 billion in tribal gaming revenues. The National Indian Gaming Commission has not reported revenues for 2020 just yet, but there is some state data available. The Arizona Department of Gaming reported 2020 started off strong with a 10% increase in tribal gaming revenue compared to the same period the year before. But in April, May, and June, tribal gaming revenue decreased for the first time in 3 years. 2020 wasn't a total loss. There was a surge in revenue when the doors did reopen.
Our region and elsewhere throughout the nation did well, just because a lot of people just wanted to get out.
The CARES Act offered some relief. The National Indian Gaming Association lobbied for tribes, letting elected officials know how urgent the need was.
The CARES Act was a lot tougher. We went to work on that thing, and we worked with different folks from different departments to say, hey, you have to get these people through this process, and you can't work on every technicality or find some kind of outdated policy and procedure to, hold them back. This is our lives are at stake here, our families, our communities.
Tribal leaders say the federal funding came with a lot of red tape.
That's kind of the frustrating thing, is that you couldn't use those funds to replenish the funds that you use for those capital projects.
Really hurt Wild Horse and our ability to diversify even more. When all said and done, we came pretty close to delivering what we said we'd deliver to the tribe.
Stevens says the National Indian Gaming Association has been providing as much support as possible to tribes over webinars.
Our generations of Indian people helping Indian people, this is no different in the professional world. We have to help each other. We have to help each other figure out how to not just get back on our feet, but to stay safe and keep these customers coming back to our casinos and keep providing the services of health and welfare and education to our community members.
Casinos have changed their hours and adjusted operations to follow CDC guidelines. Despite the challenges, tribes continue to rise to the occasion to provide for their community members.
You know, this tribe is doing a lot more for the community than its own local leadership is doing. So both from the city or county level, and I think the tribe has been very active in getting out these mass vaccination clinics.
Despite the closures during the pandemic, tribal leaders continued working on gaming issues. Like many businesses, they've adjusted, but say it'll take some time to recover from this global health crisis. In Phoenix, Karina Dominguez, Indian Country Today.
A report released this week names the top 10 endangered rivers. American Rivers named the Snake River number 1. Once the largest producer in the Columbia River Basin, today its salmon runs are on the brink of extinction. The loss of salmon is an existential threat to Northwest tribes who depend on the fish for culture and identity. Alyssa Macy breaks this down for us. From the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, Oregon, she is the CEO of the Washington Environmental Council.
American Rivers does a report annually where they look at endangered rivers across the country, and there's a couple of factors that they take into account. One is the magnitude of the threat. The second is the significance to the river, of the river to the people and to nature. And the third piece that they look at is a critical decision point. So the Snake River has landed as the number 1 most endangered river on this report for the fact that the salmon runs in the lower Snake River are getting close to extinction. We know as Native peoples here in the Pacific Northwest and throughout the entire West Coast region, like salmon's not just important to the tribes along the Columbia River and the Snake River. It's important to tribes throughout this entire region, all the way up to Alaska, all the way down to California, as part of our identity, as part of our subsistence, and certainly fishing is a part of our treaty rights that we have secured hundreds of years ago. So this river has been named because of the threat of extinction, because of its significance to tribal people, to the economy, to the region, and also the fact that we have an opportunity right now here in front of us to take bold action to address what the Snake River is facing right now.
The report recommends removing dams.
There are 4 dams on the lower Snake River. What they have done by damming up the river is to basically prevent the free flow of water in the river. Salmon need to go upriver to spawn. They need to be able to travel. There has been millions and millions and millions of dollars spent on fish passage, ways for fish to sort of get around these dams that are along the river. It has not been successful. Salmon numbers continue to decline. So what we are looking at now is really, how do we address this particular issue? What happens to the water that backs up behind the rivers? Well, it gets warmer. That is not something that helps salmon. It also increases the chance of things like algae growing. It changes the temperature. It changes the ability for fish to really be successful in returning and spawning and being a part of the ecosystem in the way that they are. So what we're looking to do, and a part of proposing along with Representative Simpson from Idaho, is to look for a comprehensive solution to this issue. This includes a serious conversation about breaching or removing the 4 dams on the lower Snake River. I think where folks get afraid is when we talk about breaching a dam or removing a dam, that kind of gets everybody's attention, right? Representative Simpson has put forward a $33.5 billion proposal that doesn't just look at the removal of these dams. This also looks at how do we replace the energy that is being generated by these dams. So what is the alternative energy source that we have to create? So this is a really exciting opportunity to basically invest in energy that's produced in the region, to look at the ways that we do commerce in the region, like how will goods get to port? That's a big piece of it. How does agriculture play into this? How does recreation and tourism play into this? So his proposal is not just looking at one piece, it's a comprehensive proposal to look at everything that salmon touches. And I think this is an issue where we say Tri-Cities, Idaho, Eastern Washington, But really it touches on issues here in the Puget Sound area, because as you know, one of the things that we talk about a lot here in the Pacific Northwest, and in particular the Puget Sound area, is the orcas. And there's so many campaigns about saving the orcas. Yes, and if you want to save the orcas, we need to talk about salmon.
What does this mean for recreation?
Recreational fishing is a huge thing in the Pacific Northwest, and salmon are a crucial component of that. American Rivers reported that in the Pacific Northwest, recreational fishing and tourism generates more than $5.3 billion a year in economic development, and also accounts for 36,000 jobs. So this isn't just about, saving fish. This is about saving an important piece of the Pacific Northwest identity, and a very important economic piece for many communities in the eastern part of Washington and in Idaho that don't have a lot of opportunity for economic development. I live in Central Oregon. That's where I grew up. That's where my community is from. Recreational fishing along the Deschutes River is a huge thing. It's a huge thing. People come from all over the world to fish along that river. Similarly, they do the same thing along the Snake. So when we talk about saving the salmon, we're also talking about saving that important piece of our economy.
This is a new position for you. What role does diversity have in the environmental movement?
I have been drawn to the work here at Washington Environmental Council for a couple of reasons. One, both organizations have over 80 years of experience working here in the state of Washington, done some really great work, have also done some things that have not included all of the stakeholders and certainly tribal nations in the past. I came here also because there was a journey that this organization has been on, a racial equity journey, some commitments that had been made, and some work that had been previously done. So when I decided to come here, I felt like it was safe enough, that there was enough progress being made. There was a very strong foundation, and I felt like this was a place where I could do some good work. Coming to Washington State is not a far stretch from Oregon, so it still feels close to home. The issues that we work on around climate change, forestry, waters, the Puget Sound, salmon, democracy are all things that I have experience doing. So it's a nice way to weave together a lot of my professional experiences. One of the things that I've learned very quickly in the past year is there's a lot of opportunity for environmental organizations like the one that I'm currently working for, and the environmental justice community to do a better job of working with tribal nations. I do see a lot of reference to the term BIPOC. I think that term is very problematic because of the I. The I assumes a lot of different things. Indigenous peoples, yes. Tribal nations, yes. So how do we actually engage with tribal nations that are respectful and ways that we can really turn the tide? Instead of standing behind tribes and their treaty rights when we want to stop a fossil fuel terminal, but really engaging with tribes to develop the campaigns to do so. So I think there's this great opportunity to do better. At WEC and WCV, we are shifting the way that we do work to make sure that we engage with tribal nations in a respectful way. So I'm looking forward to the journey here in the state of Washington and hopefully setting example for other historically white-led environmental organizations to be better partners with tribal nations, not only here in Washington, but across the country.
Thank you, Alyssa Macy from the Washington Environmental Council. When we come back, Dream of Wild Health. Dream of Wild Health is honoring its founder this spring, Sally Auger. Joining us today is Hope Flanagan. She's Seneca and the Community Outreach and Cultural Teacher at Dream of Wild Health. It's a nonprofit dedicated to restoring health and well-being in the Native community by recovering knowledge and access to healthy Indigenous foods, medicines, and lifeways. Welcome, Hope. Tell us about Sally.
Well, Sally was a real go-getter and helped so many people along the way. I know just now I was talking to a friend who was mentioning about Sally helping with Louise Erdrich was getting her bookstore going, and when Sally started up the two programs that I feel like really got the ball rolling, where she was helping people who came out of prison, like men who were coming out of prison that needed a place to get their feet on the ground. And then she also started a domestic abuse shelter for Native people. These were for Native people. And she could see when people had their fingers in the ground, when they were reestablishing that connection to Mother Earth, that there was a healing that happened with that. So Sally was so motivated to go forward and look for land to develop this farm so people could reestablish that connection, because she could see that that was a healing piece to all this. So through her many different endeavors that she did to support the community, she saw the need for getting those foods to our young ones, kind of reestablishing the connection to our traditional tribal foods, to look at food sovereignty, because a lot of our tribes still struggle with, access to clean, good, healthy food, and that she was reestablishing that connection with the tribal ways and food. So she did quite an amazing amount of work in that area. We have this saying that we raise children and we raise seeds. Well, I should actually say we raise leaders and we raise seeds. So we have young people come out from the Minneapolis and St. Paul area. We drive vans up there to our farm at Drew Wild Health, and it's in Hugo, Minnesota. And we grow out seeds, traditional tribal seeds. We have a pollinator meadow, a native orchard. We have an area where we grow out vegetables and foods that we can bring back into the native communities. And like I said, we're trying to rematriate some of those seeds that Sally so generously stewarded during her lifetime. She was gifted a bundle of traditional tribal seeds from an elder named Cora Baker, who was a Potawatomi elder. And this was part of Sally's inspiration to see the seeds come back and give their gift. And as we know, those old seeds are full of nutritional value, full of history, full of connection to the people. Last year, we had quite a few parents saying, we wish you had a school. So because it is pretty intensive, we're looking at the science of it, reading some of the materials from way back with our ancestors that knew the importance of these seeds and how the seeds kept us going and strong. So there's so many different aspects of it. The young ones come out there and they learn how to chef. They learn how to bring in the vegetables. They learn how to plant whatever we're growing. They learn about the pollination. They learn about the importance of native pollinators, because as we see, like the honeybees are really struggling. So we need to fortify those native pollinators. They learn about regenerating the soil, like you need to have the soil not just where it was last season, but it has to be better than it was last season if those plants are going to have the nutrition to give back. So they're always learning, and then they come in, they learn about gathering the foods, what the nutritional value is, and then they get to learn from native chefs. So we've been working with the Food Lab and Sean Sherman, and with Gatherings Cafe and Brian Yazzie, and different chefs, native chefs in the community, to learn how to chef, and then they can do that for their family. So we had 2 programs like that this winter, where we would deliver food to the young ones, and then they would chef it up and feed their families.
Thank you, Hope Flanagan, Outreach and Cultural Teacher at Dream of Wild Health. Caitlin Anawa Boisel takes us to a Zoom class where some students are building their first hide dolls.
While we're moving stuff, how is everybody doing on their hair ties?
At Northern Michigan University in Marquette, students are taking a 5-day workshop to learn how to make traditional hide dolls. For Julie Perry, this is her first time making a hide doll. She believes practicing this art helps her heal and stay connected to her culture.
It's medicine and knowledge that I'm able to bring back to my nieces and nephews that they didn't know about and that they need in order to heal.
We're teaching cultural skills here. Maybe none of them have danced before. They didn't have regalia before. Now they'll know how to do it.
Making dolls without a face was also a choice for the instructors. It's a traditional story from the Haudenosaunee people about a young girl.
Because she was sent to Earth by the Creator. She was gorgeous. And that cornhusk doll found herself at the edge of a river in which she looked down and she saw her reflection. And so she was like, whoa, look at that. Look at me. The Creator just gave me such a wonderful gift with this beautiful face. As a result of doing that and spending time looking at her reflection in the water, she was neglecting her responsibility in being a caretaker of the nation's children.
So while she slept, the Creator took her beautiful face away as a lesson in humility, a lesson in taking care of others first and looking out for the future generations. It's a lesson April embraces and makes it her mission to pass along.
I was really inspired to say we need to see more little girls holding these dolls.
In Wisconsin, Caitlin Ottawa-Boiselle, Indian Country Today.
It's National Haiku Day, so here's one I wrote for you. Desert sun grows so warm, beaming from a studio frigid and dark, so happy when stories are told. Thank you for joining us. Stay safe and have a great weekend. I'm Mark Trahant.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.
Indian Country Today is produced at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University.
This is Indian Country Today.